Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Grace Holland. New details continue to emerge about the Fayetteville woman charged with murdering her two adopted children. This week, we are learning about how Avantae Deven became a licensed adoptive parent and hearing from a property owner who says she left the home she rented in horrible condition. WRAL's Chris Levingood has been following the story since the beginning. Chris, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, and as you said, again, we've been talking about this several times. There's other podcasts. If you're interested in this case, you can go back and listen to those in the feed. But Chris, can you catch us up on how we got here and where we are right now?
So, I mean, essentially, Blake Devin went missing back in March, and then there was a little confusion on, wait, he's been missing for a year plus, but only now is it being reported. Investigators have had the very daunting task of trying to piece this together over a while. Then we learned after Blake was reported missing, at least to our knowledge then, his adopted sister, London Devin, was reported missing. And then that culminated eventually to skeletal remains being found. Avantae Deven, their adoptive mother, who was arrested, charged with murder and some other charges as well. And so now we're at the point where she is in jail awaiting, her day in court. And I've essentially been trying to dig into her history because that's one of the biggest things here. We don't know who she is. And yes, her trial has not happened yet, but I think it is our responsibility to do what we can to try to figure out who she is, where she came from in terms of kind of came into the scene and how she was able to get her kids adopted, because I think that's one of the biggest questions I have had from people. How does she adopt these children? That is what I've been able to uncover.
Okay. So let's start with this property. And can you talk about maybe why this was relevant in the first place, to find out to hear what a property that she may have had in the past might have looked like?
So this is a rental property specifically. And the reason why I looked into it again, we're trying to figure out backstory here. We know that she moved from Western North Carolina at some point. I think it was mid-2010-ish, 2014-ish, and moved to Cumberland County at some point. And that was after the adoptions of 5 of her kids. And I wanted to look into what was it like out there, anyone who might have known, legitimately known. What is it about her that that would be of substance? And I think this is of substance because it speaks to the conditions of a home during the time frame in which she would have had children in the home. This person, he remembers just seeing, his name's Steve Slocum. He's the person who owned the property, no longer owns it. And he said he only remembers meeting her, I believe he said one time, and that was it. That was just the inception of giving the keys over, and that was it. And then the rest was just over the phone, etc. And he remembers that he rented it to Avantae Deven, her mother, and then he remembers seeing a little girl who he said was someone that she defined as someone that she had adopted. And that was it. He only saw one girl. That's all he had mentioned. So that kind of gives us a timeline a little bit in terms of when specifically, which again, like I said, this is 10-ish years ago,
right?
What he's telling me. And it gives us an idea of where she was in Leicester, North Carolina, where this house was. Pretty spacious house, too. But it's the condition of the house, how it was left. That's what I thought was noteworthy, especially what he remembered after a second call. Wait, I forgot to tell you something. And I thought, okay, we need to turn this into a story so we can at least paint a picture for her background in terms of where she was before Cumberland County.
Okay. And so what were the conditions that he says the home was left in?
So he says, and he was very adamant, he said this was basically like a brand new house. He had a couple properties out there at the time, same street. And he had mentioned that, it was time where she had talked about maybe buying the house. That was discussed. She and her mother maybe thought about okay, we might buy it. But then ultimately, no, they weren't going to do it. And then they were going to return the keys and leave it at that. And he mentioned, okay, well, I can come and get those keys from you. She said, no, don't worry about it. We'll just leave the keys in the mailbox and then, you can come get it. And he said when he went to go get the keys, checking the house, ceiling fan ripped out from it. There was some kind of twine or something wrapped around the blades individually or something of the sort. He said it looked as though the bathtub had been overflowed with water and it did damage to the drywall. He had mentioned that the stovetop was broken to some degree. And the house was not how he left it, essentially. He said, Chris, this is a brand new house. Those were his words. Mm-hmm. And, he essentially said, hey, So here's the deal. You left the house like this. Either, we can settle this in court or you can pay me back. And he's a guy, he said he wasn't trying to like be Mr. Tough. He was actually, I don't think he did any background check or anything. He was legitimately just trying to do something, someone needed a home. He wanted to provide the home. He didn't think he had to get too much into it. And he said, we can either go to court with this or you pay me back. And the expression was, no, we'll pay you back. We'll make sure we pay you back. To my understanding, Avantae said, we'll make sure you get your money, et cetera. And he was paid back like thousands of dollars every month until he was repaid about $40,000. And then
wow.
And I asked him, did you do anything after that? He said, no, I was repaid. I didn't, business was concluded. For him, I think it was just, this is a worst case scenario, which was fixed. And so he was done with it.
Right.
And so it was like, all right, well, she paid me back. All right. But the other thing is when I called him again and asked him, because I try to sometimes call people multiple times because you might remember something after a call. And he goes, Chris, I remember one thing that I thought was strange. I forgot to tell you about it. Somebody installed those chain locks that you see on the hotel doors on the top corners of the door. And he said, I thought that was strange. Why would someone install those on the inside of the door?
In like the bedrooms?
Like the exit doors. So like to go outside.
Oh,
so he's like, reasonably, if somebody, obviously if it's at eye level where you and I stand, that's to prevent someone from getting in. But the top left corner, he thought that was odd. And I asked him, well, why did you think it was odd? He was like, I don't know why else someone would do that unless you're trying to have somebody who is shorter not able to leave that door. Now, I'm even careful about taking that sentence even further. I'll let people surmise what they surmise from it. But he thought it was strange enough to mention it. And again, he points out that it was high up where you have to be tall enough to open that door. So if there are children in the home, et cetera, and that's all I'm going to say there because I don't like to speculate. But I wanted to mention that part because he thought it was noteworthy, and I thought it was noteworthy of mentioning.
Right. And I guess in the context of what we know from investigators about the home in Fayetteville, how does this square?
Well, you got to remember the conditions, that we were learning, like how Blake reportedly died. They believe he was, malnourished, starved. They were kept in a small room, to our understanding. I think it may have been the bathroom, but it was a small room. And they believe that London may have died in a similar fashion. And to me, I believe you can't ignore this. Like someone brought this to me. They go, hey, they're, internet sleuths do their things, and sometimes they'll bring stuff that's like, I'm not really sure if that's warranted. But this, to me, I thought, all right, the condition of the house left like this, and, this person, and he knew the address that he had told me matched up with the address with someone who lived with Avantae Deven, which I said, okay, that address matches up. And I thought that was noteworthy of bringing it, because the one thing I'm careful about is bringing updates to the story that don't either speak to her background, because, again, we don't know much about her, or don't speak to how she was able to adopt kids. Because then we start to skate into, like, true crime drama. And it's like, hey, remember, like, people died, like, connected to the story. So I'm not trying to make it sensationalist, but this particular element I thought was important, again, because it speaks to what things were like before she moved to Cumberland County.
Okay. And like you said, the other big piece to you is how she became a foster parent. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll get into that. So, Chris, you've been digging into Avantae Deven's licensing as a foster parent. What did you learn?
So bear with me here because it has a bunch of back and forthing. So there is an organization known as Grandfather Home. That entity merged into to form an organization in 2014 called Children's Hope Alliance. It was that organization, Grandfather Home, and some other organizations that formed it. And essentially, this is the organization, and this is me talking with someone from the organization who dug through records, et cetera, that says that she was a licensed first foster parent. Avantae Deven was a licensed foster parent and then a licensed adoptive parent through Grandfather Home between the years of 2007 and 2013. That time frame is important because that falls within the time frame that she adopted 5 children, including London and Blake Deven. And I asked very specific questions in terms of how she was able to adopt because, again, people have asked me, how was she able to adopt? Again, we don't know much about her background. What did she have the credentials, et cetera? And to my understanding, they're saying that Grandfather Home at the time required 40 hours of training and background checks before a child is placed into a home. She met those requirements, to our understanding. And also, not one, not two, but 7 letters of recommendation were written on Deven's behalf. There's a little bit more with that story that you'll see during my story that airs tonight. But it really gives you a background in terms of what was allowed, what criteria were met in order to allow her to adopt, which I think is key to this. The foster care system / adoptive system, I think, is the big story here. I mean, obviously, it's obviously very tragic what has happened to Blake and London Deven, from what we've heard from investigators. But I believe that we need to examine, which we've done on our program, on the record, on TV, the foster care and adoptive system. What system is currently in place, and is there a fault or something in it that needs to be addressed? Which is why when I'm not working on this stuff, that's where I'm kind of working on the background, in addition to my anchoring and other duties. But I think it's so important that we address that particular part, which is why we're speaking with some other folks who have ties to the foster care system, and trying to put up something a little bit bigger. Can't say too much about it right now because it's been an ongoing effort, but I think that part is important. Again, how she was able to adopt, and I if I could, I would like to talk to her directly. I think I've mentioned to you before, I've tried speaking with her attorney, and I was told no comment. Anything in regard to this, no comment. So for right now, all I can do while we wait for a trial, while we wait for her to appear in court, which is going to happen early next year, is I dig into her background to try to piece together who is Avantae Deven.
Right. And, we'll look for your story coming out tonight, and all those details. Where are we at in the court case? When's her next court date?
So it should be sometime in mid-January. When I last called the district attorney's office in Cumberland County, I'm trying to make sure that I keep up with what's next, because a lot of the court dates we've had have been mostly administrative, mostly just kind of really paperwork, that kind of thing. But I think what we want to know are what are the next steps for her? What kind of defense could we be seeing here dealt with? Which we're not going to know until, they appear in court. And, not being able to talk to her lawyer obviously puts up a wall for me in trying to piece together something. But also, and I am not, I make no illusions of this, she has a right to remain silent and, to, speedy trial, et cetera, make sure she doesn't say anything that incriminates herself. But I have an obligation to make sure that I'm at least attempting to reach out and try to get some information to try to piece together, her side of things. These are the crimes you're being charged with. What do you say? That's what we do. And the hope is that I'm able to get some kind of answers as I continue to look into this. But it's not over. I mean, I wager you and I are going to sit down and probably do a series of these that kind of encompasses the whole thing when it's all said and done. But it's not said and done. That's why I keep on digging into it.
All right. Well, we'll see you next time, Chris, and we appreciate it. Thank you for listening to the WRAL Daily Download. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email with triangled news, events, and headlines to help you get ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.